Mr. Johnson, how are you? I'm great, thank you. So this is the post-conference observation for the last time I observed you, and I took a couple of notes because I know it's been a week or so. So just to remind you, the lesson that day, I think the kids were taking the first 6 minutes to finish annotating an article from the previous day.
Oh, cool.
Because they just needed that extra time, and then you were preparing them to take a Google Form quiz over the article, that 8-question quiz, and then you gave them about 20 minutes for the quiz while you circulated, and helped them out and answered their questions, redirected, things like that. And then they submitted their quizzes, and you kind of reviewed the annotation process with them a little bit. And then I believe they had the last 10 minutes of class to start annotating their article for the next day so that they could be ready.
Yeah, they did it on their own solo.
Okay, great. So kind of tell me a little bit about the planning or pacing for this lesson.
Sure. So I struggled a little bit with trying to understand how much time I should give them for annotations, because I remember that was right before the STAR test, so we had introduced the annotation methods that we thought were most important, and we kind of Frankensteined it together. We took the ones that were really good at this one and then got rid of the ones that weren't. Put them together.
That makes sense.
So it was the first time for the kids being introduced to that. So in a lot of ways, I think I overestimated how much time they probably needed.
Okay, that makes sense.
With that said, though, I'm always okay with giving a little bit extra time because it gives me the opportunity to walk around, and that probably has a lot to do with the student population that I teach specifically.
Right. So tell me a little bit about the group of students that had been in your room for the past couple of weeks in preparation for the STAR.
Sure. So we, as an English department, got the idea from the math department here at Lake Highlands, and we said, it sounds really cool. We're going to try and mirror that and do it with our kids. And so what the idea behind it was that we took the students' data from the simulation, which they took in January, and assuming that they really did take the test seriously, which we come to find out not all of them did.
Right.
Shocker.
Right, I know.
With that said, though, we assumed that all the kids took it seriously, and then we grouped kids together by similar struggles, and I don't want to say strengths, whereas there were some strengths that coincided with a lot of the kids, but we didn't necessarily group the kids together by their strengths.
Right.
We instead grouped them together by the teaks that they struggled with. And then we asked ourselves, well, which teacher, according to the same data from the simulation, which teacher students' populations didn't struggle with that certain teak?
Right.
And from that, we kind of made a guesstimate, but we said that probably the data shows that this teacher maybe does something different than the other teachers, right?
Yeah.
Like the way that they teach it obviously maybe gets to the kids. Maybe it's the way that they talk to them. It's relational.
Right.
And so we took those kids and we grouped them together by the teak that they struggled with the most, paired them with the teacher that had the best data results for that teak. And so we allowed those kids to stay with that teacher for 3 weeks up until the STAR.
Right.
The Monday before the STAR test is when they went back to their regular teachers in case their regular teachers wanted to touch on, like testing strategies or anything like that. But the kids that I had specifically with mine were the kids that were lower performing, I guess is the best way to put that. Still great kids, and still a lot of them I was like, man, what are y'all, what are y'all struggling with?
Right.
But like I said, so that's the gist of the thinking behind
the grouping.
Absolutely.
Well, and so keeping that in mind too, the fact that some of the students in your classroom at that time were obviously yours since the beginning of the year, but a large percentage of them were not yours.
Absolutely.
Something that I noticed again that I thought was really important, that I wanted to really reinforce and talk to you about, was your classroom culture and your learning environment. Because again, I noticed throughout the course of the observation that even though some of these kids were new into you and they hadn't been in your class before, they seemed pretty comfortable asking you for help or opening up and following directions, things like that. So why do you feel that is?
If I'm being completely honest, I really do think it's because I try to take the pressure off the kids. Being somebody that struggled with anxiety, like previously in my life, just a little bit of stress that a lot of people look at and they go, oh, that's nothing. To me, it ends up being this massive pressure. And so I remember that with my kids. And so I always just try to take the pressure off the kids. I think some teachers tend to put pressure on the kids to try and hold them accountable. I think with me, it's more of, hey, I care about you, and I do remind kids that I'm not looking over their shoulder as like a gotcha moment.
Right.
I'm just, hey, I'm just trying to see where you're at, if I can help you out, right? Like, if you're not doing what you're supposed to, I'm going to hold you accountable, right? But I'm not going to be a jerk about it. Like, I don't want to show up to work every day and be unpleasant to be around, and I don't think my kids want to have a teacher that's unpleasant to be around. So just taking the pressure off the kids, just reminding them that, like, hey, it's okay to mess up. because I'd rather have them mess up in my class than mess up on the STAR test.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I can catch that failure there. So yeah, it's definitely a culture, but I don't really think about it as a culture. You know, it's just how I like to treat the kids. You know, I get the best out of them, and it makes me happy, and I feel like it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
You know, the kids don't deserve to have somebody come in here and be a jerk to them or put extra pressure on them when in reality, like, you know, it's not the idea of school.
Well, I think that's good too, that you can kind of be that filter and manage that pressure, because I know being in a tested area, as I, you know, have been in a tested area for the past 8 years or so, that we as teachers, we tend to feel the pressure a lot, and it's hard sometimes to not put that then on our students, right? It's hard to just say, hey, you know,
it's hard.
And, you know, kind of mask it a little bit and let the kids know, hey, yes, this is important, and we want you to be successful, but not like make them feel like, oh, your life's over if you don't do well. And so I think that is important, you know, making sure that they understand, I care about you. And I think you made a comment too that I really liked. You talked about, you know, when you were getting the kids set up to do the Google form quiz, I remember you were kind of talking to them about the importance of not cheating, essentially, not looking up answers. And I really like the way you explained it to them, and you framed it like, hey, I would rather you mess up on this quiz so that I can help you out than have you cheat and then mess up on the STAR test where there's nothing I can do about it. Sure. And I thought that was a really smart way to explain it to kids, because, you know, a lot of times as teachers, we're just like, oh, because I said so, or because cheating is bad, you know, but
take a little bit extra time to explain to them, and they'll see eye to eye.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought, you know, that they really responded well to that, obviously, and respected that, you know, because they understand, hey, like, Mr. Johnson's here to help me, so if I do bomb this quiz, it's not the end of the world. Yeah. The whole point of being in here is so that if I bomb it, you know, we can figure out why I bombed it and what I need to do next time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the phrases that I use, maybe you heard, I tell the kids, don't sacrifice your integrity over something that's small.
Yeah.
You know, like, guys, you're taking a reading quiz. Like, at the end of the day, we do need to take it serious.
Right.
But your integrity is way more important. Right. And, like, if you cheat on one of my tests, I'm going to have that idea in the back of my head, you know, for the rest of our careers, that someone I need to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not worth it.
Yeah, and again, I think that helps contribute to your positive classroom culture. You know, when you take time to explain things to the kids that way, you know, it obviously shows that you respect them as young adults, and it's not just this because I said so and I'm the adult kind of thing, you know, and I can tell that they definitely latch onto that and kind of say, like, this is good.
I feel it, but I don't always see it.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
It's cool to see it.
Yeah.
You know, that's when I see it.
Yeah, for sure. So main questions that I kind of have about the lesson, and again, I know I'm sorry, it's been a while, so hopefully your brain is a little refreshed on it.
As soon as you say it, I remember.
That's good. That's good. So the first question I was just going to ask you, just kind of reflecting, you know, I've asked you that question before about what percentage of the work you think you're doing or what percentage the kids are doing, but this time I'm adding a little piece to that. Sure. So thinking about the lesson, what do you think the ratio of teacher dialogue to student dialogue was during that lesson?
Sure. So I really took into consideration your suggestions the first time around. And I think the first lesson we said I was probably at 70% of the work, if not more like 80, right? And like, so I was exhausted at the end of the day after doing it 5 times.
Right.
With this one, I switched. And I don't know if I'm just crazy, but I feel guilty. You know, it's like the kids did so much. I think that one probably was 70% kids, 30% me, because I front loaded and I talked. But like I said, it's just getting over that like feeling of like, hey, you're not doing enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand that.
But at the end of the day, I still feel like I'm capable of doing more. You know, and I like that because the kids didn't necessarily raise their hand and they need that extra bit of help. If I'm doing only 30% of the work, I've still got so much left to give.
Right.
You know, and I can really hit it hard with those kids. Whereas sometimes I feel like they get tired, Andy, or tired, Mr. Johnson. You know, because I'm trying to facilitate the learning and trying to facilitate the lesson to make sure that we're sticking to the time and reading the clock. And I don't necessarily get a chance to just go like, hey, what do you need?
Yeah.
Right? You know, like let's do this. Let's figure it out. Let me focus on you for 2 minutes. I feel like when I do it the 30, 70, that's where I stop feeling guilty because I start going, okay, now I can really help the kids.
Right.
It's a little bit more focused on just kind of being the ringleader rather than being the ringleader, the circus, the ticket taker, the popcorn seller. Like,
that's a great analogy for it.
You know, it's like I can do what I'm supposed to do. You know, like I'm here to entertain the guests. I'm not here to sell them popcorn or take their tickets.
Right.
I put on the show. So, like I said, it's just transitioning
into more of that facilitator role.
Yeah, just kind of feeling yourself evolve.
I did definitely notice the shift of, you know, you're facilitating and the kids are working. And so when I say things like 70-30, it's not that you're only doing 30% of your job. Right. It's just the idea that the kids are doing the heavy lifting mentally, and you're not doing the heavy lifting mentally. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly, because that's where I feel guilty.
Right. So it's not saying that you're only performing at your job at 30%. It's just saying that if we were to if there's 100% mental lifting in the classroom, the kids should be doing the majority of the mental lifting, where you are kind of guiding them, you know, and facilitating, like you talked about.
Up the kids that fall off.
Right, right. And so with that in mind, like I said, it was a lot more student-centered in that regard. Just about dialogue. So one of the things, you know, that I wanted to ask about was just student dialogue.
Sure.
So I noticed, you know, a lot of obviously teacher dialogue, because you're reviewing with them, or you're giving them directions, or, you know, you're having the little one-on-ones with them when you're circulating. But as far as student dialogue with them talking with each other, where do you feel that kind of was within the lesson?
Within this lesson, it was probably zero. And I think part of that to blame is because we were focused on something like the STAR test, where it's like, hey, annotate on your own, right? So I think that I think it's awesome that you brought that up. You know, holding me accountable, and I think it'd be a good idea to maybe have them have some kind of discussion. You know, hey, what do you think of this annotation step? You know, does this annotation step help you if you do it this way or that? So yeah, definitely something more student dialogue.
Well, that like kind of leads right into my follow-up question is how can we maybe make some of our dialogue more student-centered? Sure. You know, because I thought you, again, did a great job making the lesson itself student-centered, where they're doing the mental heavy lifting and you're. But I'm just thinking about in general the dialogue, and the reason I bring that up. I'm going to borrow from biology for a minute. So, you know, biology is a very vocabulary intensive test for the kids. And that's where a lot of our students struggle, right, with understanding the vocabulary words. Well, in talking to some of the biology teachers, I kind of asked them, I said, so let's say you guys are doing your lesson on genetic material, right? I said, how many times a day do you as the teacher say the term genetic material and the different vocabulary words that go around with it? And they were like, oh, probably like, you know, 50 times a day, 100 times a day. I said, that makes sense. I said, how many times a day do you think your kids say those words and interact with those words and use those words? And they were like, oh, that's a good question. And the reason I brought that up is because when we look at research, it shows that the more kids are talking about things and having to explain processes or use vocabulary terms, the more it's going to stick in their brain. Right. And so that's one of the reasons I brought it up, is because, you know, I know it's one of those lessons where it's kind of like they're finishing one thing and then they're going into another thing that's independent with the quiz. So they can't necessarily talk about that. But possibly those transition times, you know, that you have, that could be a quick time to pair share, you know, hey, share your annotations with your partner. What was the most surprising thing that you found? Or, you know, just some things like that. So that's where I was coming from. And like I said, you already kind of led into that question with some ideas about how you can get them talking and things like that.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, it's kind of like us, you know, like I thought I knew everything coming out of college, and now it's like, man, like there's so much I had to learn. So yeah, absolutely. There definitely needs to be something like that within every lesson.
Well, and like I said, I think a lot of times, I think for you, you know, you're so focused on the lesson, which is not a bad thing. That's a good thing. You're focused on, hey, this is our goal. This is what we need to do. You know, goal oriented. That's not a bad trait to have as a teacher. So I think, you know, you become goal oriented. And so I know this happened with me when I was, you know, teaching full time in the classroom, is that I would feel like I wouldn't have enough time to do something like that, you know. And then when I started kind of building it in, I was like, oh, this really only takes an extra 5 minutes total, you know, because a minute here, 2 minutes there, a minute there, you know. And so once I kind of started building it in, I was like, oh, this is right. It's only adding 5 minutes or so. So that was just a thought or a question.
At the end.
Yeah, exactly. Just wrapping up at the end.
Let them discuss more with each other.
Well, and that kind of leads into my next one, because the area of refinement I was kind of looking at for you was communication. Not communication from you to the students. I feel like you do a really good job communicating with them. But having kids communicating with each other in order to get to that deeper understanding or that higher order thinking. So that next question I was kind of going into was about levels of questioning. So looking at levels of questioning, and I mean, you can use Bloom's taxonomy, or you can use, you know, what depth of knowledge levels, or whatever you want to use. But just in general, thinking about your questioning, the levels of questioning that lesson, what levels of questioning do you feel you mainly asked during that lesson? Okay, what do you mean by that? Like,
so I get a lot of call and response.
Okay.
That's a really bad habit that I have. And I don't know if it's like feeds into like this reminder that like, oh, my kids are learning. It's like, that doesn't necessarily prove that they're learning.
I see. I see what you're saying.
And that's something that I need to reflect on hard over the summer. And I need to think about like, be more poignant with my questions.
Mm-hmm. See, I love the way you put that.
Yeah.
And this is why I like conferencing with you, because I ask you these questions and then you're already like, oh, I already know exactly what I need to do. No, that's good. That's a good thing.
My bad.
Because I don't have to constantly like pull it out of you.
Sure.
You already have reflected and you already kind of were like, yeah, I thought about this.
You get the ball rolling. And then I'm like, okay, I know where this is going. That is a good idea.
Right. But yeah, no, I definitely understand where you're coming from. So my main question kind of off of that was, what do you think you can do, or what are some things you could possibly do to move your questioning to a higher level? Like, starting at level 1 maybe, because everyone kind of needs a place to start, especially when your kids are a bit behind or you feel like they're a bit low. But then how can we build up from level 1?
So there are a couple of books that I think have been recommended. I'm probably going to read those over the summer. I think one of the main ways that I can do it is you can start with level 1, but I need to be more cognizant of what response I expect to get back.
That's a great way to put it.
Because I think sometimes, like, when I first started teaching, I just asked a question, and any kind of response, I was like, cool, I'll roll with that. Like, at least somebody's interacting.
Right, exactly.
But now it's like, okay, when I ask these questions, it's because I expect this response. And then when I expect this response, then I can ask this question. It's kind of like connecting the dots, right? But like, to the kids, they don't even see the dots.
Right, exactly. Right? But it's like you have the blueprint.
Yeah, and then it's kind of like reminds you in high school, you're like, God, my teacher's so smart. How did I get to that? And now I'm like, okay, now I get it.
Right.
Right? Like, right. So I'm starting to see the full picture, and it's going to be just me putting in the work that it takes to kind of recognize, or maybe not necessarily put in the work, but it's going to take the research and me, like other people that put in the work, right? Other people, like, I'm not going out and doing experiments on how to ask kids.
Right.
So I don't want to overstep, like, or make it seem like I'm trying to say I'm doing more than I am, but there are people out there that have looked into things like this, right? So I just need to immerse myself into that, right? And get familiar with, the science of asking questions.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
I can imagine that lawyers probably have to do stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm sure there's tons of research out there. It's just going to be me putting in the work.
That's a great way to do it. Well, and I think something too that can combine these two with increasing student dialogue and getting to those maybe higher level questions is, when you ask a question and the kids give you the blank stare, a lot of times that's where I always did the turn and talk, because a lot of times they had answers, but you know how it is. They're too afraid to say it out loud, because what if they're wrong? Sure. Or, and even though they trust you and know you would never make fun of them, it's still a very real fear of like, well, what if I sound like an idiot?
And they're in a room full of kids that don't really
know. Exactly. And so just having, putting that question out there, and the kids are like, huh? Yeah. Or you have that one kid that maybe knows, but then if you have them turn and talk, it gives every kid an opportunity to at least think about the question. Even if maybe they're wrong or they don't quite get it yet, they're still interacting. Their brain's still moving, because if it's only one kid answering, all the rest of the kids are like, well, I don't even have to think about it, So yeah, I just thought about that as a cool way to combine, both of these things that you're wanting to incorporate and work on. Yeah,
because it goes back into what you were talking about. I'm sorry, I'm running slow.
No, you're good.
It goes back into my kids remind me the day that I talk fast. I was like, yeah, it takes me back to being at Chili's when they used to ask me, like, are you from Dallas? I'd be like, yeah. They're like, man, we thought you were from New York. I was like, yeah, it's a little offended by that. No, but it goes back into what you were talking about with the kids teaching each other. It's like, I learned so much from teaching the kids. If the kids can teach others, the only thing that gets me about that though is that then I get iffy about like, what is that kid teaching that kid?
Right.
And then I'm like,
well, and I think that's where when you come back, you get the debrief and the discuss. Because I agree.
And you want
to make sure that the kids are having the right types of of conversations and they're on the right track. So then you can kind of debrief and that's when too, as a teacher, you can kind of circulate as they're talking and maybe you pick up on and you can address the misconceptions when you guys come back together.
Hey, let's talk about this.
Right. Like, hey, let's clarify. I noticed some of you are a little confused on, what this is. Let's clarify that or whatever. Right. Yeah. Well, and so that kind of leads into, the third question kind of, I guess, goes with questions 1 and 2, just wraps everything up in a nice bow. It's just, what are some ways to involve all students in effective communication with each other during the lesson?
Sure. Effective communication during the lesson. Could do a gallery walk, right?
Yeah.
making sure that I have enough time for the kids, or make sure that I've built enough time in for the kids to have chances to turn and discuss with one another.
Yeah.
You know? I really like the idea of the gallery walk because it gets kids up and moving, right? But there's got to be something other than the gallery walk because I feel like kids are starting to get like used to the gallery, right? Like there's like I've got to come up with something different. And who's to say that I'm going to be the one to come up with it? But still, I'll get it from somebody.
Right.
So yeah, so something like that, something facilitating where they get up, they move, they talk, they interact, and make it feel natural.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm not standing over their shoulder if they're talking about this stuff. So that's one of the cool things.
Yeah.
You know, is hearing the kids talk about the stuff, but. You know, there are some times where they say inappropriate things and I let it slide just because they're having real conversations.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like.
Well, and I think that's good because I think some of the reason that some teachers are almost afraid to have kids turn and talk or have them up and talking is because they're like, what if they say something off topic? And I'm like, and?
Okay, because their mind is not on one topic.
Right, and if they say something off topic, that's when you can come by. I would always just come by and make a joke about it. You know what I mean? I'd be like, oh yeah, but that's not going to help you answer this question, whatever you're doing Friday night, or, you know. And so I'm like, you can redirect a kid without, you know, like you said, acting like a jerk to them or.
Build a relationship.
Right. Exactly.
And that's an opportunity for you to show them that, like, hey, like I'm not like just a teacher. You know, a lot of my kids find out a lot of stuff from me just because I walk around and like. To be honest with you, that's part of, you know, probably one of the favorite parts of my day. You know, just getting and talking to them and just like. Not about school stuff.
Right.
You know,
just take a minute.
Hey, did you watch the Stars game? Hey, did you do this? Did you do that?
And that's when those relationships are formed.
Right. And then it's easier when I go, all right, guys. So you know, let's get back. Right. Let's focus.
Right.
You know? I will talk about those things with you, but right now we need to talk about this.
Exactly.
Right. So. Yeah, it all comes back to relationships.
I agree.
Just giving a damn about the kids.
But yeah, so like I said, I think, you know, classroom culture, learning environment is really a very strong area for you. And like I said, I did notice that, you know, this lesson this time around was a lot more student-centered, which I think is great. And just kind of keeping that in mind because, in my opinion, when it's more student-centered, it makes it easier to walk around and have those conversations, which then builds that culture that you're so good at creating.
For sure.
And then just, again, looking at moving forward, maybe something to think about as you're planning, you know, your lessons and, you know, as they don't have to be maybe as structured since our STAR test is over and we get to kind of delve into a novel now. Just the communication piece, you know, how can we use effective communication, higher level questioning, things like that in the classroom.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
Cool.
Like I said, take everything you give me to heart. I respect your opinion.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're awesome.
Awesome. Cool. Good conference.
Good conference.